Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spraglin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. Except lately, I've been on a track of teaching about the Zettelkasten. And tonight is no exception because I have a question that I am answering for Joseph. So, Joseph, thank you very much. Well, I've given this episode an oversimplified title of what goes on my yellow legal pads. Joseph's question was far more nuanced than that, and he was dealing with the fact that I say that I usually put anything that I'm writing on my legal pad, and I always put on my main cards a reflection that is about my feelings about the material that I've just learned. And that's a must on my card. So I explained the issue is, well, what goes on the legal pad and what goes on the cards. And I will try to explain that and show you some examples. So let's take a look at the cards. I'll switch to the overhead camera. Oh, and by the way, pardon the red nose and the hoarse voice. I'm a little bit under the weather, but this is so much fun sharing the Zettelkasten with you that I don't care. I'm going to do my podcast tonight anyway, because, well, this is kind of the high point of my day lately. Okay, so switching to the overhead camera. Okay, here we are, taking a look at my desktop. Well, like so many of you, in the days before I had a Zettelkasten or worked on a Zettelkasten, I put my thoughts and my ideas into a journal, which then I would number and keep over the years. Well, when I became interested in the Zettelkasten, I carried over some of that technique and I just started putting it on cards instead of in a journal. For example, this is a set of cards that runs for 5 cards. I would tend not to do that these days. In this case, it was a collection of related information. I would probably have broken the information down to multiple cards, and for each segment of the information, I would have had what I learned and what I thought, what I learned and what I thought. Well, sometimes these cards got this long, not so much because I had so much different information, but because my thought processes kind of went on, and those too would sometimes spill over to multiple cards. Nowadays, I tend not to do that. I'll go to a second card readily, but if it's getting any longer than that, I tend to go to my legal pad. So let me show you how that legal pad operates for me. In the first place, my legal pad has now replaced my journal. And the reason for that is before I was producing any output myself, a journal was fine, but things would get lost forever in my journal. And if I ever wanted to go try to find them, good luck. It was like pulling teeth to find exactly what you were looking for, and probably you wouldn't succeed. But when I started producing output, like for instance, my 35-week course that I taught on YouTube, I wrote out my lesson plans and my lessons, which I released in PDF form. I wrote out on yellow legal pads before typing them into the computer. And so at that point in time, the predominant reason that I was using my yellow legal pads was for drafts of my writing. And as of this point in time, that's still the predominant use. I do still have some, not many, separate journals, but in one case, I'm keeping a journal because a friend and neighbor and I are going through a book together, and so I'm keeping a journal of just the thoughts and reflections on that book, so that when we get together, I have everything in one place. But for the most part, everything that I write now, journal entries or what, are going on these yellow legal pads. So let me show you how they work, because they work in 2 different ways, which is the question that Joseph was getting at. Okay, I'm right now putting the finishing touches on an essay that I've been working on for about a month, which is how to use a Zettelkasten to write stories packed with emotion. Well, if you think about it, I started with a 35-week course on YouTube, and then I summarized that down to a 70-page book that I thought captured the essence of it and gave the bulk of what you needed. And now my new challenge that had been challenged to do was, how can I take that book and boil it down to an essay and give the reader of my essay enough understanding of the processes that I use in writing with emotion that they can take the ball and run with it, having read only an essay, not a book, not a 35-week class, just an essay, and would have enough information to catch what's going on and start using it. So that was a really, really fun challenge. So I wrote the draft in my yellow legal pad, and on the back of these, this is a bib card, my initials, and then how to use a Zettelkasten to write stories packed with emotion. That was my nickname for the title. And on the back of the card, I've got the journal, which all happens to be in this one, our D25, and where I wrote and what the section that I wrote about was present. And so all of the pieces of writing that came together to create that story, that essay, were captured onto this card system. Now, in the course of writing that essay, I pulled, of course, many cards. Well, one thing that I did not do that I'm now, especially thanks to Alex, who's been asking a lot of directory questions, I did not capture a list of all of the cards that I pulled to write that essay. And I'm saying to myself, darn, I wish I had done that. I have a list of where I wrote what I wrote, but I don't have a list of the cards that I pulled. And so what I want to not do that next time. Next time I want to also make a list of all the cards I pulled and why I thought they would be valuable. But it turns out that I have one card that's a perfect example of the other way that I end up putting thoughts and reflections, not on a main card, but on a yellow legal pad. This is a regular main card, and it's a card that I pulled for the essay. And it talks about the technique of elaboration. Basically, the technique of elaboration is for people who want to learn something. They want to memorize a list. They've got dates and times. They've got an exam. They've got to perform well, and they need to commit a certain amount of stuff to memory. Well, the technique of elaboration basically says, well, pull it into your own experience. Make it relevant to you. Add personal detail to it. And when you do that, you'll remember it better. And that there's related research, and I've tracked down the source of that, which shows that psychological studies show that information related to the self is retained far better, far more rapidly, and held in memory far longer than information related even to those who are dearest to us in our lives. There's nothing stronger than relationship to the self to be remembered. So I thought about including that concept in my essay because it does play into what I teach in my book, that we want to have our reader bring something of himself into the story. But I decided not to use it because I felt it was going to be too technical. It would take us down a rabbit trail that that didn't need to happen and might cause more confusion than help. So, but I didn't want to lose the thought. So to avoid losing the thought, I simply put this star, and to me that star means one and only one thing. It means there's something on the back of this card, because most of the time, main cards only have information on the front. But that star just says one thing. Turn the card over. There's some more stuff over there. And in this case, that more stuff is this particular article. Well, it's not really an article. It's a reflection about how the technique of elaboration can be used in fiction story writing. And so I captured it because it's not in my essay. And I wouldn't have it if I didn't capture it this way. So that, I hope, explains why I sometimes go to my yellow pad for writing. And the other reason that I will do this, even if I'm not even working on a project, but I read something that's very provocative, that's very thought provoking, that really engages me and sends me hither and yon, pulling other cards just to put the thought together, I will write kind of a mini essay right smack on my yellow legal pad because the ideas are so exciting to play with and I don't want to lose them. So that's the other reason why they will go down on a legal pad. And yes, my journals end up on my legal pad now too, just because my other journals, my notebook bound journals, weren't filling, and I didn't want to have things in two different places. And these are really well tracked now. Okay, Joseph, I hope that answered your question. If not, please ask again and I will give it another go. I just really appreciate all of you taking the time to comment and ask your questions because they let me know what you need to know more about so that I can target my podcast directly to you. And as long as you have questions, then I will stay on this subject of Zettelkasten. I think it's so important that I am happy to do that. I know that my normal audience is writing with emotion, fiction writers who are dealing with constricted time to write or wanting to manage character development and management and make believable characters. But I'm happy to share the Zettelkasten with the wider world, and the particular group of wider world that I would like to try to reach and encourage to do a Zettelkasten is the creative side. I think that all of the rules that people put around Zettelkasten drive the creatives away, and I think that's a big shame because there's nothing intrinsically restrictive about a Zettelkasten. It's the perfect vehicle for creatives. You just have to break free of the straitjacket that all those mathematical types try to lock you into. And that's saying a funny thing because my background is math and computer science, but I straddle both sides. And I wouldn't want to be stuck with all those rules. And so my goal is to give you a system that lets you live with your Zettelkasten, use your Zettelkasten, grow with your Zettelkasten, and make it your own because you have to make ultimately the decisions yourself. But to give you some more ideas and options so that you can get your Zettelkasten off the ground and rolling. Because remember, the only problem with a Zettelkasten, only time it's hard, is when you're getting off the ground. It's like taking off that heavy jetliner. Once you get into cruising altitude, it's great. It's comfortable, it's easy, and no matter what system you end up adopting, you'll be fine. It's just giving you enough information, enough guidelines to have the confidence to give it a try. Because I think it's enormously powerful and you will really love having one. Thank you. Bye-bye.